Amigos e minhas amigas.
Dear friends, I would like to greet the UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres. I would also like to greet the President of the Permanent Fórum on People of African Descent, Epsi Campbell, on whose behalf I salute all the people who participate in this extraordinary place to combat racism, xenophobia, intolerance and hate speech. Racism goes beyond borders, as demonstrated by the constant abuse suffered by Brazilian soccer player Vini Jr. The lesson we can draw from these unforgivable episodes is that if Vini Jr., a 22-year-old, is capable of standing up to hostile crowds, there is no doubt that we can and must do more to interrupt this dehumanizing circuit of violence. More than ever, this forum is essential to advance the UN Declaration on the Rights of People of African Descent. The delegation of Brazil, under the leadership of the Minister of Racial Equality, Anielle Franco, reiterates its commitment to the promotion of racial equality in the domestic and international spheres, leaving doors open for hosting a session of the forum in Brazil. With the participation of each one of you in this fight, I am certain that we will turn the tide against racism. Warm hugs and an excellent forum to all of you.
Obrigado, President da Silva.
Thank you very much, President da Silva. And I now give the floor.
Anielle Franco, Minister of Racial Equality of Brazil, to the rostrum.
His Excellent President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, Madam President of the Permanent Fórum of People of African Descent, Ms. Epsi Campbell, heads of delegations and permanent representatives of member states to the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished participants. My name is Anielle Franco, and I speak here as the Minister of Racial Equality of Brazil. With this great joy and hope that we retake the participation of the Brazilian government in the Permanent Forum of People of African Descent, a space to combat racism, xenophobia, intolerance, and hate speech. The organization of the Durban Conference in 2001 in South Africa is a disruptive milestone for global Afro-diasporic history, where activists, militants of organized Black movements from around the world and member states claimed that the fight against racism is an agenda of human rights. The reduction of social, gender, and economic inequalities will only be effective with the centrality of the fight against racism on the stage of global geopolitics. It was due to the leadership of Black women integrating civil society organizations, governments, and research centers that the Brazilian delegation had great influence in the discussions at the Durban Conference. This happened because even before landing in South Africa, Brazilian men and women were already actively working on local and regional discussions that appeared at the 2001 global meeting. Today, in 2023, this mix will be no different. Under the leadership of Ms. Epsi Campbell, a leader and reference for all Black women around the globe, we have here the largest delegation from Brazil in history. We, the Brazilian government and civil society, are here to confirm Brazil's commitment to the world in leading the fight against racism and promoting memory and reparation policies as a central pillar of modern democracies. The marks of colonialism and the enslavement of African and Afro-descendants have a profound effect on communities and countries around the world. Here, we rise the opportunity to promote a global effort to mark the memory of our past, pointing out the contradictions of the present without losing track of a future path of change and transformation for our people. It's under the consequence of colonialization and the remnants of an inconclusive abolition that Black, African, and Afro-descendant peoples stood up in the last century to promote essential rights to the exercise of life. The past decade, marked by the international recognition that people of African descent represent a distinct group whose human rights need to be promoted and protected, was not enough for the actions that we believe to be necessary and effective to be globally mobilized. In recent years, we have experienced the fragility of even great achievements, many of them dismantled and corrupted by the barbarism that authoritarianism provokes. We saw the precariousness of life, hunger, and violent social injustice intensified in the face of pandemic, which mostly affected Black populations on this continent, and which historically falls mainly on the shoulders of Black women. What emerged from this scenario is our collective and democratic strength, which has returned Brazil, but also in the world. With that being said, I reinforce the proposal and speech of the President of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, that the UN General Assembly, which meets here annually, proclaim the renewal of another decade of the International Decade for People of African descent. This time, let's focus on the theme of memory, reparation, and justice so that concrete and imminent actions are developed for around 200 million people who self-identify as Afro-descendant who live in the Americas, and also for many millions more who live in other parts of the world. Peace, democracy, international security, the fight against inequalities, and the guarantee of human rights will only coexist when centuries of systemic racism, which is characterized by dehumanization, subjugation, trauma, the erasure of our culture, and the psychological violence are repaired. And that we have one more opportunity to start here today. Let's rise together in solidarity with the boy, Vinícius Júnior, a Real Madrid player who in the last week has suffered the consequence of racism, its manifestation through hatred, violence, and aggression by more than 500,000 people in a football stadium. The legacy of colonization and the dehumanization of African descent remains in the nations that today lead global debates about the future of the planet. Whether in Brazil or Spain, our governments, I repeat, our governments, must prioritize in our internal and external policies the fight against and overcome racism, xenophobia, and hate speech as central pillars of our democracies. This global forum represents the hope of a future where no other Vinícius Júnior has to go through violence and hatred just because of his skin color. It was here in this country that we are in today that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. pointed to the dream of civil and political rights for people of African descent. Mandela, in his speech for freedom in South Africa, in Cape Town, on April 11, 1990, pointed out that the march towards freedom is an irreversible path. Anielle Franco, my sister, and former councilwoman who died on March 14, 2018, with 5 shots on her head, said that no Black woman will ever be stopped again. Ladies and gentlemen, authorities and representatives of civil society, especially the huge Brazilian delegation present here, let us walk together for memory, justice, and reparation for every person of African descent on this planet. Brazil, the largest Black nation outside Africa, makes itself available Brazil, the largest Black nation outside Africa, makes itself available to host this large and important forum in the future. Our country still has an arduous path to promote the rights that our population deserves. We want to be the world power in the fight for reparation and promotion of the rights for people of African descent in the entire world. Together, together, and together, we will overcome racism and promote the true liberation for our peoples. I thank you.